Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, November 15th, the coldest morning of the season so far in many of the suburban locations of the big cities along the I-95 corridor region. It dropped down into the 20s for the first time this year, and certainly many mid-Atlantic, northeastern U.S. locations experienced the lowest temperature so far this season here on Tuesday morning, and really this upcoming week will be impressively cold across the nation. One of the coldest weeks in the middle of November in a long time from coast to coast. I'm sure that's the way it'll turn out. We'll go through the temperature pattern over the next several days. And again, the extent of this cold wave is very impressive and somewhat unusual for sure, as it'll extend really from coast to coast. Here we are beginning the day here on Tuesday morning looking at 850 millibar temperature anomalies from last night's operational run of the GFS at 0Z. And we're starting off with colder than normal conditions all the way from Southern California to northern New England. And it's not too difficult to imagine where the upper level low is and where the upper level ridging is taking place right now. Indeed, we have warmer than normal conditions throughout much of western Canada, northwestern Canada, Alaska. That is where a very powerful ridge is developing, and deep upper level low situated over the central U.S. Now let's walk through the next several days, and not only is it cold now, well below normal across the central plains as an example, it gets even colder relative to normal. Later this week, going into the upcoming weekend, no doubt there'll be some low temperature records set, especially across the center part of the nation later this week going into the weekend. Let's just move forward here, and again keep focused on the extent of this cold from coast to coast. Warm over Alaska at the 850 millibar level, and that's where very strong high pressure ridging is developing over the next few days. Off the charts type of high heights over Alaska over the next few days. And here we go with a reinforcing cold air mass by Thursday, and look at how far below normal. This is some 20 to 25 degrees below normal, maybe even as much as 30 degrees below normal. I do expect records to be broken in much of the central U.S. later this week. We're talking Thursday, Friday time frame, low temperature records, and again extending all the way virtually from coast to coast, while yes, over Alaska they'll remain above normal temperature-wise. And here we go into the upcoming weekend. On Saturday, much the same, coast-to-coast cold and warm over northwestern Canada and Alaska with that strong ridge, and it lasts all the way through the upcoming weekend. This is going into Sunday evening. Again, very cold, especially in the eastern half of the U.S. by the end of the upcoming weekend. Warmer than normal over northwestern Canada and Alaska. Well, let's take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast from the 0Z GFS, and again focus in on this region in terms of higher heights than normal, and over the central part of the U.S. lower heights than normal. Just an incredible ridge pops up and intensifies over Alaska. Let's move forward here and look at that. The purple showing up here way above normal in terms of 500 millibar heights. And whenever you have a upper level ridge like that setting up over Alaska, what it allows for is the transportation of cold air masses from the polar region all the way into the central and eastern U.S. You can just see, follow these height ice attack lines here, and you can see the incredible cross-polar flow that again will allow very cold air masses from way up here over the polar region to drop south and east into the central U.S., and then that's eventually spills out over into the eastern U.S. This is the forecast map for tomorrow morning. Let's move ahead here. Much the same, just kind of a reinforcing upper level low moving over the central and eastern U.S., and this maintains its significantly above normal height pattern over Alaska and northwestern Canada. Again, a flow of air coming from way up in the North Pole region down into the central U.S., No doubt there'll be many records broken later this week, let's say Thursday, Friday time frame, especially in the central part of the U.S., maybe spilling out over into the eastern half of the nation as well. This is the Friday morning forecast map. And now let's go all the way into the upcoming weekend. Here we are now all the way into Sunday. Deep upper level low, still situated over the Great Lakes, still way colder than normal across much of the eastern half of the nation as late as the end of the upcoming weekend. And still some higher heights than normal across Alaska and western Canada. Again, a very, very impressively cold week from coast to coast across the U.S. This week, the middle of November, will certainly go down as one of the coldest weeks in the middle of November in a long, long time across the U.S. Well, let's kind of focus in now on the Mid-Atlantic Northeast U.S. in terms of the precipitation for later today into tonight. This will be the first accumulating snow in many of the interior, higher elevation locations of the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. So I wanted to go through the NAM model. We're using the 12-kilometer version of the NAM model from 060 last night. Again, focusing on the precipitation here because it ranges from a cold soaking rain to accumulating snow, and later in this time period we'll have a significant Great Lakes snow effect. Still relatively warm lake waters, and you'll have very cold air pushing on top of that relatively warm water. The result could be significant lake effect snows later this week, Thursday, Friday, even into the weekend, just downstream of Lake Erie, just downstream of Ontario. Buffalo, for example, could get walloped. Now let's go through this on an hourly basis. And the rain is pushing in from the north, from the south and west to the north Andes. Here we are early afternoon, and you can see it runs into cold enough air for some snow and sleet to break out. Interior, higher elevation locations across certainly eastern West Virginia, far western Virginia, south central Pennsylvania. It'll be in the form of snow and sleet in those areas. A cold soaking rain for the immediate I-95 corridor region to the coastline. However, don't be surprised to see some snowflakes in some of the far northern and western suburbs of the big cities, both at the onset of this system and in the overnight hours here. Let's move forward here, and you can see some accumulating snow as close to Philly as the Lehigh Valley and the Pocono Mountains, northeastern PA. Certainly some accumulating snow, and again, even in some of those far northern and western suburbs, snowflakes can mix in later today and tonight. I'm talking about way up in northern Chester County, for example, in southeastern PA, upper Bucks and Montgomery County, and certainly all the way down to the far western part of Virginia and eastern West Virginia. There'll be some accumulating snow and sleet mixed in. Let's keep moving forward here. All interior locations of New York State, New England on tap for getting some snow and sleet, and again some accumulations in many of these interior higher elevation locations. Low pressure will intensify along the Mid-Atlantic coastline. That'll be the culprit of all this precipitation. It'll turn out to be a pretty soaking and chilly rainfall for places like D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City, but just a little bit to the north and west, some of the first accumulating snows of the season goes all the way up into mid to late morning tomorrow as snowfall up across Maine and certainly the northern half of Vermont and New Hampshire could get some snow accumulation, some sleet mixed in. Finally, by later tomorrow, that system pulls away from Maine, and then we start looking at the Great Lakes, and here's where we start to get a northwest flow of air. And this particular time of the year, you still have relatively warm waters of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and any kind of a cold flow going across those still relatively warm waters can create some low-level instability in the atmosphere, and the result, lake effect type snows. And here we start to see some banding setting up here by late Wednesday night going into Thursday. And certainly can be some spots that get walloped by the lake effect snows. You can see the isobar pattern here showing some of these potential wind trajectories that tend to follow the isobar pattern here and parallel the isobars. And here we have by late Thursday night going into Friday a lot of lake effect snows on the table here, just downstream of Erie, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario as well. From Erie to Buffalo, as an example, be on the lookout for that. This goes all the way into Friday morning, and it remains very cold. In fact, turns a little bit colder relative to normal across much of the nation later this week, going into the upcoming weekend. So the first interior higher elevation snows of the year later today, tonight, into early Wednesday in the Mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S. Reinforcing shot of cold air puts much of the nation in the deep freeze later this week into the weekend. Expect many low temperature records to be set, especially across the central states, and watch out for a Great Lakes snow event later this week going into the upcoming weekend. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.